Hello and welcome to another episode of the Socially Numb Podcast. I am your host, Richie Leahey. Now, this podcast, I've been waiting a little bit because every year there are leaks at E3. And that happened last night. So, as you know, or as you probably know, with Southbound Sports, we cover mainly Pittsburgh sports. And the Penguins were in the Stanley Cup last night. They ended up winning it. So as I was watching the game, instead of podcasting, I started to look into E3 a little bit during the intermissions. And boy, was I surprised that Microsoft already had their new console announced. I thought the conference ran from the 13th to the 16th. So my plan was to go ahead and dedicate next week's podcast, the whole thing, to E3. I thought it would be a good first look considering the Nintendo Switch. This is the first E3 that the Nintendo Switch has been live for. And Nintendo had already announced that they were doing, 25 minutes? They were doing 25 minutes and then they were streaming the rest through their Treehouse website, which they go ahead and make announcements for. And I was waiting to see, I didn't know if they would do anything with Pokemon Go, if they would go ahead and detail some games. There were some rumors that the FIFA version for the Nintendo Switch was going to be called just FIFA. EA Sports FIFA. Now, I did see a leaked cover that had the Ronaldo version and it said FIFA 18. That would make me feel a lot better, and I would jump in on getting the game for the Switch. Sports games are always sort of an enigma to people, and especially for the developers and the publishers, because certain sports do better in certain countries. So it's not a worldwide game. Zelda is a worldwide phenomenon. So they go ahead and release the console here in the United States. It's also going to sell well in Europe. It's going to sell well across most of the globe. Pokemon Go, they announced it in the United States or wherever it launched. I don't know if it launched in here first or not. Next thing you know, other countries are complaining that they want it. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Even though they had the Ingress game, which I guess maybe is in South America, Central America. I know a lot of the leaks come out of South America, which makes me think that that's where they are. But I could be wrong. And they go ahead and get the demand up, and then people go ahead and push for that purchase. Now, with that, the E3 conference always goes ahead and showcases the best new games, best new launches, best new consoles. Everyone usually goes ahead and puts out their best foot forward. And Microsoft went ahead. They must be feeling the heat. I know that they had sold, I think it was the lowest amount of consoles. I'm not sure how it compares to the Switch yet, but it's looking like the Switch is going to go ahead and outsell the Xbox One. It is looking like the PlayStation 4 has already done that. I have to look at the numbers again, but I'm pretty sure that the Xbox One of the current gen consoles is going to be, or is, the lowest selling console. So Microsoft goes ahead and they announce Xbox One X, which the name made me laugh because their naming conventions make no sense. People go ahead and they chastise Nintendo, saying like, how am I supposed to know? Now I understand this is the same exact problem that Nintendo faced with the Wii U. People bought a Wii. They thought the Wii U, if I hear Wii U, I think Wii University, and I think it's some type of game. If I'm being honest, there's no way that was a good product name for people who were trying to get exposure or even like some type of outlet. And I mentioned it before on the show, at least I think I did. I was at the store and a dad was looking at games and he was going to buy the Wii U version for his daughter. And he's like, well, we'll see if it works when we get home. And if it doesn't, we'll just return it. And I was like, that's a completely different console. Do you have the Wii or do you have the Wii U? He's like, well, we just have the regular Wii. And I said, well, that's not going to work. That's a complete different console. And he's like, well, I didn't know that. We'll look online. And then he left. Didn't even thank me or anything. So some people, it's tough to get out there, but whenever there's two consoles that have the same similar name, it's going to be confusing. And then here's the kicker. So you have Xbox, you have the Xbox 360, you have the Xbox One, now you have the Xbox One X. The 360 move didn't make sense. They should have just went with the Xbox 2. Now they went back to Xbox One. I'm not really sure. I knew they didn't want to be a version behind the PlayStation. But if they would have kept their naming convention, they would have went ahead and it would have equaled out to the PlayStation 4 right now. I know the PlayStation 3 came out, so they went ahead with the 360, trying to make it seem like it was better. But when the PlayStation 4, they just kept going in that order, 1, 2, 3, 4, it makes it very hard for the Xbox to seem like it knows what it is doing. Okay? So now, you go ahead and you're putting out a new console. Their premise of their console, the pitch for this one, was that it would be able to run 4K games at 60 frames per second. Which, if you know anything about gaming or computers, that is very, very powerful and impressive. And I would be shocked if they didn't have some type of issues. Because I know I have a 4K television. Almost nothing works with it. They have to have some slow codexes to read, to do high definition video. I have a 4K camera, as you know. And when I do the video, you have to go ahead and put it in a new encoding, which the quality still looks great, so I'm not knocking that. But it has to be very specific, or the television can't handle the 4K. It just can't. The specs aren't up to date. Or, they probably are up to date, but they're just not as powerful as what they could be. Now, in a few years, 4K televisions, yeah, they can go ahead and they'll probably be good. That's why I'm confused. The television companies, they're pushing 4K. Now there's rumors that there's going to be 6K or 8K, which just means 1,000. K means 1,000, and I think it's how many pixels are there. And it's not even an exact number, I don't think. 4K, I think is slightly over 4,000. I could be wrong. I don't know off the top of my head. But I know it's something like that. And with the names, they're going. So 6K, at a certain point, you don't notice the resolution difference. My 4K television, I got a ginormous one. Gigantic. I know ginormous isn't a word. Stupid pop culture. Injecting these fake words into the vocabulary. But I got a big one because I wanted to see the difference. And with that, with a big TV, I'm talking about 50 inches or plus, yeah, you can go ahead and see the difference, I would imagine. A little bit. It's not that big of a difference. I can play PlayStation 3 games beside PlayStation 4 games, and they look pretty close on a medium-sized television. 40-something inch, 30 inch. The smaller you get, they look almost identical because you can only pack so many pixels into a certain radius. And then depending on how far away you're sitting, your eyes can only determine, once you get to a certain sharpness, that's all you can get. Now the 60 frame rate, that's the big kicker. And it would be interesting to see if they could go ahead and potentially push this down the line to 120 or something even faster, because what that means is you're not seeing the jittery motion. And for Xbox to really push this is the time that they can go ahead and overtake the PC market. As you might have heard at the beginning of this podcast, when I first started, there were rumors about the Xbox One being able to running Windows 10. And I was pretty excited about that because I had a feeling that I could go ahead and get some of my Steam games on there if they unlocked it. Now, I know they probably would never do that, but they have to make the decision. Are they making money off games, or are they making money off consoles? Because that's where it comes in. Potentially, the rumors are that this console is going to be cost over $1,000 to make, just because of the hardware specs. If you want a 4K processing computer now, it's going to be over $1,000. The Xbox One X is going to sell for $500. So they're going to take a huge loss on this console, to try to go ahead and tell Sony that, hey, we got better specs than you. The PlayStation 4 Pro outputs at 4K, but it's supposedly a fake 4K. And again, there's no games. Like, for people to go ahead and put out 4K games, it doesn't make sense for developers to spend time making these ultra high definition. I would say most of the time developing a game is in the artwork. At this point, the game engines are pretty much done. If you have a game like Assassin's Creed, that engine's done. The game goals are already in place. The physics are in place. Each year, what are you going to do? You're going to update the environment. And what takes so long? It's drawing all those intricate details. You have to make a gigantic map if it's doing open world like Assassin's Creed, where I can run around to different parts. You don't want it to load every couple seconds, so it has to be able to process. And if you go ahead and you're making that game at 4K, like, that's going to be a hefty game. It already takes 30 gigabytes to download some of the PlayStation games. I just started to play Uncharted 4, which I'll bring in later. But that game, I went ahead, bought it, took 30 gigabytes, I think, to download and off the disc. And if I'm playing a 4K game, it's just going to get, it's like an arms race where they're pushing it, but they're not pushing the other things. They're not giving you an 8K terabyte hard drive with it. You're still getting a 500 gigabyte hard drive, but you're playing these games that are in ultra high definition discs that hold, what, 60 gigabytes max, and then you have to download the rest of the game because they can't make a 4K game that's only an hour. People aren't going to pay $60 for that. And for the time invested it takes to draw all those things, all the assets in the game, all the characters, the different costumes, the different skins for the guns, whatever, it's a big investment. And so here's Xbox, they're pushing forward. I'm skeptical. I was high on Xbox and Microsoft. I thought they were going to go ahead and make some moves. They went ahead, and Nintendo made a console that jumped out and just, to me, got me more excited with the Switch. Again, do I care about the graphics output? Most of the time I play handheld, if I'm being honest. It's about time that I have a handheld that plays big games. If FIFA goes on it, I'll get it. If Madden goes on it, I'll think about it. Same with FIFA. If they're pushing these online player card modes still, EA, trying to squeeze extra money out, then there's a good chance that I won't get it. I don't know. I'd have to look at it. It would be nice to have a game that I could play a sports game on the go. And I know that they have the NBA game that came out, sort of like the NBA Street version. So they had a game come out. It's like NBA something, Showdown or something. It's a street version. You're playing outdoor basketball. It's 2-on-2. I think it's $20. Probably a good buy. I think if you went ahead and pre-ordered it, you also get a pre-order of another game, Shaq fighting game, I think, which is pretty funny to me. And I like that. I think the basketball game's already out there, so I don't know if I can still get that deal. Because the Switch version apparently was supposed to be promised online like the other versions, the Xbox and the PlayStation versions. And of course, they didn't deliver. Now, some of that's on Nintendo. They've been pretty shady with their wireless offerings and their retro offerings. And to me, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Now, Nintendo, the rumors are that if you pay $30 a year for their online service, that you're going to be able to play Nintendo Classics, NES Classics for free regularly at any time. The original news came out that it was going to be a pay service and you might get one game a month, and after that month is up, you have to buy it to keep playing it. But I think they reversed course, and this is what I wanted E3 to clear up, because a lot of these are just rumors on the internet that, hey, they might let you play any NES game for free, and developers can opt in for a cut of the monthly whatever. And depending on how many people download that game, then that, whatever the business side of it is, I don't really care. But I know that the game side of it, if they let me play any NES game at any time, there's no reason for a Nintendo Classic, which is one of the reasons why they're getting rid of the Classic. I understand the plug and play, here's 30, 60 games or whatever, and I understand if they only put those games on. I mean, yeah, there's licensing rights with Tecmo Super Bowl back in the day, that you can't go ahead and release these Nintendo player names on the Nintendo Switch because the NFL Players Association only signed off on the NES version of the game. And so some of the sports games that I would love to play on the Switch, like the original Tecmo Super Bowl, maybe in a few years after Nintendo puts out their new version of the Switch, maybe someone will hack it and tell me how to do that. I have a PSP that plays them though, so I'm pretty content there. It would just be nice to have a multiplayer, 2-player, even sitting and using the same screen. You undock the controllers and you play a game of Tecmo. I would even love a wireless NES controller that you would take with you. So that you would keep the handles on the other one, on the actual console itself, dock it, and then you just connect 2 other controllers that are like retro controllers, and then you can play it. And then whenever the game's over, I just pick up the actual one, put it whatever, throw everything in my bag. So I don't have to worry about taking handles off, wondering if the console's sturdy enough. The handles give it enough weight while they're on and docked, sitting on the desk, that it should be fine. Especially because I always prop it up in a case after that flimsy stand. Man, I always forget about that. That's soon to break off my Switch. I guarantee it. But we'll see what happens. Now, that's pretty much what I've been waiting to hear. And so that's what I'm going to look at next week. I'll bring a lot of that stuff in, kind of go through E3. I might record as it's happening, as the news is coming out, because that way it will be a little bit more fun. And I did one of those for the Super Bowl. I recorded little bits throughout the Super Bowl, and it turned out to be a pretty fun podcast off the hook. Like I said, this was back in the day before I had the mobile recorder, so it was something that didn't have as good as quality that I think I could do now, going ahead and giving thoughts on the go, piecing it all together into one big thought, and then I usually throw an intro and an outro on it, just me talking to kind of wrap things up. But that's what I'm looking at doing for E3 this week. I thought it was a surprise that Microsoft went ahead. Maybe they had plans, I don't know. I haven't been following it, looking up to it. But whenever the news came out that they're doing a 4K, that was my initial reaction. That, okay, they're putting out a 4K console. Are they going to have the game developers draw these great, magnificent games? Yeah, they can do a bunch of first-party games, and which is probably what their idea is. They do a bunch of first-party exclusive games in 4K, and then they can point and say, well, PlayStation, you don't have these. PlayStation's doing their own Uncharted, which I'll give my thoughts on later, once I dive more into the game. I think I'm a fourth of the way through the game, third or fourth of the way. And I'm also playing some of the PlayStation 3 games. I did get a PlayStation 4 camera. I have not tested it yet. So that's another thing with the streaming I know I teased. That's something that I'm looking into, and that's something that I hope I can get up soon. But that's what I'm going to be going through and testing here. And that's what I'm working on throughout this week to bring to you next week on the podcast. Okay, so the next big piece of news that I saw in regards to E3, and I stopped to look this up. So apparently some companies go ahead and give these presentations before E3, which is what Microsoft did, and Bethesda did the same. So Bethesda, they've been talking about putting Skyrim on the Switch. I think Nintendo actually came to them and said, hey, we want an RPG on the Switch that's going to be mature. Personally, I'm kind of glad they went with Elder Scrolls instead of Witcher, because I already own The Witcher. There's only 3 of those. And there were some rumors and people asking if Witcher was going to be available on it. But I don't own the Elder Scrolls series. And I know that they have different options for Elder Scrolls, and you could probably get them cheaper on PlayStation or on PC because it's been out for years. But I'll be honest, I'll probably will get the Switch version. And just because it's tough to play RPGs when you're an adult. That's just the facts. If you have a family, you don't have time to sit down and invest yourself in a game. Now, if I'm able to play it in little bursts on the go with the Nintendo Switch's pause feature, where it's kind of just pick up and play, man, that's going to open up a whole nother world to these RPGs that people can't sit and play. And I'm not talking about the online version. I'm interested in playing Elder Scrolls just through the actual story mode. And I know they have some older games that are available for free, so I'm thinking about diving into them. I know I'm looking at a couple of the old Zelda games and even ones that weren't made by Nintendo. I'm going through and playing them on the 3DS or whatever. But the fact that there's going to be an actual mature RPG, great environment, classic game. I mean, it's always up there rated high. And it's made by a great publisher. It's perfect. And I'm very glad that they're going to go ahead and actually go through with it. I hope they include the expansion packs. It's kind of tough to tell with the size of the game. It's really tough to tell with the size of the game what they're going to include and what features are going to be available for download and if it's going to be on cartridge. Now, personally, I would probably just go ahead and download the game onto the SD card. I'm assuming it's going to be a couple gigabytes, probably 30 or so. And I have that much space on the Switch. I bought a 200-something gigabyte SD card because my idea with the Switch was to go ahead and find 5 to 10 games, depending on the size. So like Zelda, I got the cartridge for because it was the first game. So my idea was to keep Zelda, the cartridge, in the system. I know there was some download with it. Download a handful of games, Shovel Knight being one of them, that I can go ahead and have on at any time if I want to pick it up. Thinking about picking up the NBA game. I think that would be a cool one to have as a download-only game, just because it's sports. Maybe picking up FIFA this year, if FIFA is going to be the actual one. And then FIFA or Madden, just because of doing Southbound Sports. Madden would be a good one to break down football film on YouTube. And I don't know if they even let you do that, though. So that's something I have to look into to see if that's even possible. And I have a feeling that it's not going to be possible. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of the Switch. And it's something that, like I said, I've been high on. I love the system. I haven't been playing it as much because I've been playing through some of the more mobile Zelda games on the 3DS so that I can go ahead and knock those out, knock out a couple of Zeldas that I haven't beaten, get caught up. Playing through Breath of the Wild, though, and it would be good to have another game contingency plan, basically. So whenever I'm done beating a couple of the 3DS games, I honestly think I have two going right now. Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, which I'm in the middle of Seasons. Ages is going to be coming up next because I'm playing them back to back. Then I think I have 5 more games that are on the 3DS. Triforce Heroes, A Link Between Worlds, I think. Maybe there's 2 other ones that are on the regular DS that I think I can pick up cheap at GameStop. I've been looking for. So possibly, I think there might be one other one. So 4 or 5 of them that are on the 3DS. Hyrule Warrior Legends, or Hyrule, I can't even talk. Hyrule Warriors is going to be one that I would probably get for the 3DS. I don't know if they're going to go ahead and make it for the Switch. I haven't seen any news. That's what I'm going to wait to find out about. I saw that they were releasing another Nintendo 2DS, like an XL version. So that gives me pause and makes me think that no, they're not going to go ahead and be releasing a lot of these games on the Switch. Which, yeah, kind of bummed out about, but not something that I expected anyway. Just looking at it from the facts, it kind of looked like that was what was going to happen. They were just going to go ahead and put out certain games, and at that point, be it. Now, with them focusing on the retro store, if that is a possibility, that's another reason that I would get Skyrim. Maybe go ahead and get, they're not going to have that many great games that I would want to get. Mario and them, I would say, like I said, if they're all going to be 20 gigabytes, which might be 30, depending on the size and scope of the game. Nintendo usually is pretty good with their game sizes because they don't waste any space. But it will be interesting to see what other games come out. Games like
Shovel Knight don't take up much space. So I can ultimately pick up a handful of games like that, download some of my favorite NES games. I've been carrying a ROMs of like the actual NES games that I own. I think I have like 40 games. So I have a folder of ROMs backing those games up, because with an NES system, I even have a retro system. I forget what it's called. It's like a remake to play NES games. It's not an original NES. I don't have that. But I do have the original controllers. So I have the ROMs backing up my games, because they never work as intended if I ever want to play them. And do I play them? Not really. Not since I beat them on the PSP. And that's one of the other things too with these Zelda games. Like I beat Minish Cap on an emulator on the PSP, even though it was the Game Boy Advance version, because I never actually played it. It was easier just to go ahead, play it on the PSP, than to try to play through it on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance, even though I'm pretty sure my brother has it and has a copy of it. But looking at the way the Nintendo Switch is going to go, I hope it does go ahead and start to put other ones on. Their other big announcement was pure excitement for me, and that is another Castle Wolfenstein game, and perfect release. I guess it could be Castle Wolfenstein, but I'm pretty sure it's Stein. But you go ahead, and I loved the remake that they did for the PS4. So I got a PS4. Actually, it was a gift from my girlfriend at the time, and she went ahead, got me the PS4. Great surprise. I didn't expect it. It came with the Last of Us bundle, which was another great surprise. I played through that one knowing that it was made by, I think it's made by the Uncharted guys, so hopefully I'm right. Knowing it was made by them, turned out to be a pretty good game, pretty good icebreaker. But then for the PS4, I get Madden, disappointed in that. There wasn't any other really games that I wanted. But then probably, I know I have like a bunch of series that I like, and that's usually how I play through games. But this is probably, it's the first game that I remember playing. So this is probably the most nostalgic to me, and a little bit more in depth than like Zelda. And now granted, I know I played Duck Hunt when I was younger, but this was like the first game that like I knew I looked forward to playing. The NES, yeah, I played Zelda, I played all these other games back. I remember we rented Batman and Kiwi Craze from the library, and then eventually the library sold it to us after a while. And I would have these games for the regular Nintendo. We never had a Super Nintendo. My mom had always talked about how she wanted one, but instead we went the computer route. And I remember my uncle, he brought over a bunch of games on discs. He showed me how to boot them up. And this was one that I know I wasn't supposed to play, but somehow we had a copy of Wolfenstein 3D that was kind of passed around. I think it was on a floppy, to be honest. You had to go into DOS and you had to type in the commands. And I remember playing through that first level over and over again, because I was just a kid. Once you get to the second level, you died. I think you just restart. And so the game came out, and I think, was it re-released for PlayStation 3? I think if you check my trophy history, I'm pretty sure I went ahead and beat that game, because it was a game that I wanted, and I always wanted to remake it. I even downloaded it, the shareware version on the PSP, and played it retro. So I've beaten that game hundreds of times over the years after that initial playing through the first level. Once I started to get a little bit older, I realized, like, hey, there's more to this game than that. So I go ahead and I get the game for the PS3. They have another reboot from like 2009, I think. It wasn't too bad that I have for the PS3. I played through that one. But I go ahead and get the PS4 version, and it is a juggernaut of a game. One of the best reimagined shooters I've played. I played Call of Duty and stuff. Yeah, the realism's kind of there. Am I excited? Do I look forward to a new Call of Duty, knowing that people play online for a little bit? That's it. That there's a story mode I can beat on a Saturday afternoon? No. Wolfenstein comes out. I'm playing, and it's taking me, it's a good, challenging game. Playing through, I'm probably normal, like I normally do. Just play through on normal when I get the game. I figure that's the way the developers intended it to be. If they wanted it to be brutal or death hard. Maybe if it's a game that I play multiple times, which I did play through. I don't know if I played through it twice, But I definitely got the DLC immediately because I wanted them to support. That's one game that I like to see. The multiplayer aspect, I don't care. I think the 2009 version had multiplayer. The other two versions didn't. And I don't know if this new one will or not. But to me, I like the story of it. It's a great shooter. I don't have a lot of time to play online. A lot of people that play online, they play at the same time every day. And I don't have that luxury. So it's tough for me to go ahead, and that's why I'm trying to get in with streaming. Maybe I can carve out some time to go ahead and do that. I know I tease a little bit about Switch, but I'm going to go ahead and start with Southbound Sports, a live camera stream, which will help me get in the groove of testing some things out, and then I'll go ahead and do the video games next. I've beaten a couple other games, which I'm going to talk about here today. We'll start about one. That's what I'm going to dive into, but that's what I'm looking at getting. And Wolfenstein, it's a great game, a single player. I can play it any time. If I'm in the middle of a story, I can jump right in. Same with Uncharted 4, which is kind of like holding me off until Wolfenstein comes out. I'll play through that game, and I have a couple of other Assassin's Creeds and things that I talk about here on the show. But for this is what I'm looking at, and I'm excited for this game. I watched the trailer. It was pretty funny. They went in a different direction with it. It wasn't just all gameplay like the Doom one. So the Doom one got me excited. They showed some of the chainsaw, showed some of the brutal kills. And of course, whenever you play the game for a few hours, we played that one online, and that's what I streamed last year. Now, I didn't archive any of the footage. This time, as I'm streaming, I'm going to try to do that, so that if you listen to this or you stumble upon this years down the road or whatever happens, you can go ahead and watch some of these old games. It would be nice if I streamed a little bit and gave some thoughts instead of just talking about it on the podcast, which might be a direction I go. Will that go ahead and replace the podcast? I don't know. It's just easier to do reviews while you play the game. I know some companies don't like you to do that, but it's going to be a little bit better because I can kind of show things that bother me, especially if I cut it up. It doesn't even have to be a stream. I can cut up some of the gameplay footage and show things that frustrate me instead of trying to explain it. And that's why I've been stocking up on free PlayStation 4 games and haven't been playing them and playing through some Assassin's Creed. First off, to clean up my PlayStation 3 catalog of games that I have to beat. And second off, to get ready and build some up for the PS4. Obviously, a game like Uncharted where there's a lot of movies in it, I'm not going to go ahead and stream gameplay of that. Online? Yeah, probably. I know they have a good online. I played Uncharted 3's beta. I was a tester for that. I went through and played that when it first came out, and that's basically all I did when I had the PlayStation 3. That's the only game I played online. And then you go ahead and I played through the stories probably over the last year or so. I don't think it was before the podcast, but I played through them. And now, here I am playing through Uncharted 4. So it's pretty exciting. And it's something that, again, I'm not going to stream. I'm going to focus on the multiplayer aspect. But that's what I'm looking at doing. And that is coming in the works. But on to the video game section for this week's podcast. So for the game of this week, I have been playing Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2. Now, I had already played Ninja Gaiden 3. I think it's called Razor's Edge, because I've been playing backwards. So, I remember Ninja Gaiden on the NES, and I played through when I was doing my retro game playthroughs on the PSP. I don't think I'd ever beaten it as a child. I can't remember. I know me and my cousin usually played back and forth. And back in those days when you had multiple people playing, you're usually able to beat a couple of games together. And that's usually how we played, and that's how we conquered games. One of the games I remember beating that I played through with my cousin was Jackie Chan Action Kung Fu, which was a pretty funny game. So that's one of the ones that I remember going through beating. I remember playing Ninja Gaiden and games like Contra, but I don't know if me and my cousin actually ever made it through to the other side. So whenever Ninja Gaiden was re-released back in 2000s, I had already switched to the GameCube at that time, I believe. So I was a little bummed out that it didn't come to the Nintendo GameCube whenever it had already been on the NES. They went with an Xbox release, the original Ninja Gaiden for Xbox. It's very tough, is what I heard. So then they re-release it on the PlayStation 3. And so I'm like, all right, I'll wait a few years because it's a story game. And it was one of those deals like I've been talking about where Christmas comes up. What do you want? Normally you go ahead and get a couple games. That's why I've been excited for Skyrim coming on the Switch, because it's another series where I go ahead and get the game, 2 or 3 of them on Steam, the older ones. I'm downloading the free ones now. I think you can go ahead and do the free ones. And I'll see what they're like, and then I'll get Skyrim for the Switch. And I'll kind of play them all at the same time. That's why I wish they would release a new Assassin's Creed on the Switch, because I'm so far behind on the PS4 ones, that it would make it easier to play the newer one on the go while I play the older ones. But anyway, Ninja Gaiden, I go ahead, I get all 3 in bulk. I start to play the first game because I figure I'm going to play them in order. And this is about a year ago. So I'm playing, and this game is brutal. It's one of the hardest games I've ever played in action fighting. And so here I am, I'm learning all the combos, going through, fighting it. I think there's only a normal mode. Someone said if you die a bunch of times in a row, it boosts you down to easy. But I don't know, I didn't see that setting. That's never came up, like it asked you if you quit or something, I don't know. I think there's like a specific way you get that enacted. But I don't know, I've been playing through on normal. And so it's taking me forever to beat the first one. And so in the meantime, I'm like, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll play through 3. Then I'll play through 2. So I played through 3. I'm not sure if I brought it up on here or not. I'm actually kind of going back through and working on expanding the show notes as I'm moving them to the Leahey Report. And I'm listening to the older podcast, so I'll know a little bit more what I talked about in older episodes as I do that. But I can't remember if I beat that or not. Or actually, I know I beat it. I can't remember if I talked about it on the podcast when I did. So Razor's Edge there was one tough boss I remember. But other than that, the game, it wasn't very ninja-esque. I was expecting a game where I had to sneak through some of the spawn levels. There's like a ninja part to it where I'm sneaking, I'm slipping through, doing things like that. But now, not so much. It's not turning into that. I'm actually fighting like soldiers, and people have guns, so it's unfair. I'm fighting these demon beasts. Man, maybe I don't remember that much of the story for the NES game, but I would still think that it would be some ninja aspect to the game. And right now I'm not seeing that. So I played through 3, and I just started to play through Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, and I beat it. So Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, I could be wrong, but I played through whatever the difficulty was by default. I think it's called Acolyte, which might be an easy mode because it wasn't normal. I assumed that it was like Ninja Gaiden Sigma 1 where it was normal and hard would be the next one. So I played through the first one. It was laughably easy at some parts. It did get tougher, and I think you kind of build up. It depends on your weapon. So basically, I tried to max out my big sword as fast as possible, and that's what I used throughout the most. Now, I did have a feeling that his actual sword was going to get powered up, just because I know the ninja games, they usually go with their sword. So I maxed that one out second, and he actually did get an extra boost on that. And that one worked a little bit better on some of the faster bosses, but I still found myself using the heavy sword on some of the more powerful bosses. You fought the same guys, these 2 devil guys, like 3 or 4 times. So that got kind of boring. The story was weird. It wasn't a game I could get into. I mean, I played the story. I listened to it. I like subtitles. It helps me immerse me in when I'm playing. Sometimes I don't have a headset on when you're watching on a TV, so it's different. If you play like through a tough part, normally it's like a breath of relief. You kind of relax for a second, so you kind of zone out on the story. And I feel like if the subtitles are there, I can read them, and that helps draw me back in. I'm like, okay, I should be reading this. That's how I played through Resident Evil 5, and even though it wasn't big high on that game, I mean, the Ninja Gaiden story was just weird and crazy. I didn't know, like half the stuff didn't make sense. I'm fighting werewolves. I'm fighting like these vampire dudes, and then I'm fighting dragons. It's like they just kind of picked, or what are the biggest fantasies? It was kind of, first it reminded me of Underworld. They had all the werewolves out there, and then the demon guys, like the vampires or whatever. Then there was a scene where they were like raising devils. It reminded me of like Temple of Doom. So it's kind of like they watched a bunch of movies and were like, all right, we're going to do a chapter on that. Then we're going to do a chapter on this. Then we're going to do a chapter on that. And it was all kind of random for Sigma 2. So I played through this game. Like I said, the difficulty was a little bit easier than Ninja Gaiden Sigma 1. I assume they did that because people complained. I know I looked online just to kind of see if there was a difficulty setting. Not that I would have changed it. I like to play through, like I said, on normal just to feel what the developers thought would be the game. But it's not like a ninja game. There's no stealth. I can't do stealth kills. Guys kind of just spawn, and then 3 or 4 guys will run at you. There's ones, like there's these bonefish. I think it was Sigma 2. So what I did was I beat Sigma 2, and then I immediately dove right into Sigma 1. And lo and behold, I did beat the military base that I was stuck on, which I'm like halfway through the game. One of the bosses was so hard in Sigma 1, but I'll talk about that later. So in a later podcast once I beat the game. So in Sigma 2, there's still some like these bonefish. They're flying at you. You can't do anything. They're going to get you. I tried to shoot them. I tried to use like some strategy. Nothing worked. So it's all pretty much just trying to get everything down and just trying different things. It kind of turns into a button mashing. And with a ninja game that had high praise, I was expecting something a little bit more. So I was disappointed. And if they rebooted the series, I know they rebooted it kind of like in an anime drawing. I'm not interested in that game. I will not be picking that one up. So that's it. That's my thoughts on Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2. And I'll be playing through the first one. I don't know. I have a couple games going. So it depends on which one I beat next. Will be the next game that I bring in to the podcast. Like I said, I've been playing through Uncharted 4. That one will probably take me a little bit longer. I also have been playing through a Zelda game on the 3DS, but that one will probably take me longer as well. So more than likely, if I have a game beat by next week, it will be Ninja Gaiden Sigma 1. But I don't know if that will happen. I'm kind of in the middle of 3 different games right now. So it might be something where next week just talk about E3 and take a week off of gaming, which is more than likely what's going to happen. So I'll be throwing together my E3 thoughts, seeing what happens. But thanks for listening. I've been putting up these on YouTube, getting some followers that way, just the audio format, as I transition more into doing some of the Twitch stuff. But this is going to be a summer process, guys, trying to bring on my archives and stuff and get everything on there. But that's my goal. So thanks for supporting me. If you could, leave some 5-star reviews on iTunes or leave some reviews. Will help boost this show. The Southbound Sports one actually made it into the top 10 on iTunes for college sports rankings, and I'd like to see Socially Numb get up there. I actually have to check the categories. I thought iTunes cataloged all, but apparently it only catalogs the top one, so I actually have to see what this one is. And I might be changing it from tech news, because we don't really cover much tech news, to video games or games and hobbies or something. So, or maybe just technology. I don't know. I got to see which one it is and see which one this fits with. But I will be making that change as I expand these show notes. It's something to be coming in the coming weeks. I've been putting these up in video form on YouTube to help speed along that process. And as I expand the show notes for them, posting them on the Leahey Report and posting them in the iTunes description, a little bit longer show note form, which I think will help them make the show a little bit more professional as we go forward. But once again, thanks for listening to Socially Numb, and I'm your host, Richie Leahey. I'll see you next week.